The stars of the system burned cold and bright above the royal palace. The sky seemed alive with colors no human eyes had ever seen, shifting blues and silvers that shimmered like liquid glass. Queen stood on the balcony of the tallest tower, her robes flowing like waves of light behind her. She had ruled her people for decades, yet tonight she felt an unfamiliar weight on her shoulders. It was not the weight of a crown or of endless responsibilities. It was something different, something human. Below, the courtyard was silent. The guards, soldiers, and servants all waited for her command, but none dared speak. The air felt tense, as if the very atmosphere knew that history was about to change. And then he appeared. Daniel, a human man, small in comparison to her towering presence, but his eyes burned with something stronger than fear or awe. They burned with courage. He had saved her life during the Battle of Red Moons, a war that had scorched worlds and left billions in ash. She owed him her survival, her victory, and now something more. She had summoned him here in private, knowing that what she would say could shake not only her empire but the entire galaxy. For centuries, the empire had followed strict rules. Bloodlines determined power, and outsiders, especially fragile humans, were never part of that design. Yet here he was, standing alive, standing before a queen who had conquered planets with her bare hands. His glowing eyes met his, and for a moment time seemed to stop. The stars themselves dimmed, as if the universe was listening. The human swallowed, uncertain whether to bow, kneel, or flee. But the queen did not ask for submission. She only spoke the words that would ripple through every world in the galaxy. "It is an honor to carry your child, human." The words hung in the air like a comet frozen mid-flight. Daniel's heart skipped. His mouth opened, but no sound came. He had survived wars, starvation, and death, but this, the thought that a being of unimaginable power and grace was carrying his child, was something he could not process. It was not joy or pride he felt first. It was disbelief and fear. For it was different. Her body, capable of bending worlds to her will, trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the knowledge that her life, her empire, and the future of her people were now tied to something so fragile and human. For the first time she felt vulnerable, not to enemies, not to war, but to life itself. The courtyard remained silent, the court frozen in a mixture of awe and shock. No one dared speak, though whispers flowed like invisible currents. The High Council had known of this possibility but had never imagined it would actually happen. They had spent decades planning the next heir, ensuring the survival of their species through controlled breeding and careful selection. A human child was not part of their designs, and yet the Queen had chosen it, chosen him, chosen life. Daniel finally found his voice, trembling barely more than a whisper. Why me?" he asked. I am not like you." Stepped closer, her presence overwhelming yet calm. Her voice was soft, but it carried the authority of a galaxy-spanning empire. "Because you have something no one else has: courage, honor, and a willingness to survive when the odds are impossible. That is the essence of life itself. That is why you are worthy." He looked at her, really looked, and saw not the fearsome ruler the galaxy spoke of, but a being capable of compassion, awe, and hope. A queen who had seen pass and yet still understood the fragile miracle of existence. He felt a strange mix of fear and honor, of unworthiness and awe. This was not something a man could prepare for. This was destiny arriving at his doorstep, and he had no choice but to accept it. Extended her hand toward him, not commanding, not demanding, just offering. He did not take it immediately. He wanted to, but the enormity of the moment froze him. And yet in the quiet space between them something unspoken passed. A bond. Not of love, not of romance, but of fate. He had saved her life. Now she was giving him a chance to change the course of history. For a moment the stars seemed to lean closer, as if to witness what was unfolding. And Daniel, a simple human from a dying world, realized something profound. He was no longer just a soldier. He was part of something greater, something eternal. The weight of the galaxy did not rest solely on the Queen's shoulders anymore. It rested with him too. And the journey, he knew, would test everything he was and everything humanity could be. eyes glowed brighter as she whispered again, "It is an honor to carry your child." And in those words, Daniel understood the truth. The galaxy, in all its vastness, had chosen a human to leave a mark that no empire, no war, and no power could erase. And that night, as the stars burned cold and distant above, a human and a queen began a journey that would change the fate of the universe forever. The halls of the palace were quiet, but tension pulsed through the air like a living thing. Every wall of polished crystal seemed to reflect the fear and disbelief of the council chambers. The High Council had gathered immediately after the Queen's announcement. They were ancient beings, their minds sharp, their hearts bound to centuries of law and tradition. And now that law trembled under the weight of a single word: human. "The child cannot be born," intoned Lord, his voice like the grinding of distant mountains. "Our bloodline must remain pure. The empire cannot survive outside the rules that shaped it." A murmur passed through the room. Some counselors nodded, while others stared at the floor, unsure how to respond. No one dared question the queen in person. Her wrath could crush worlds, but her choice had already broken generations of tradition. High Priestess, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, leaned forward. "Rules exist for a reason. A human is unpredictable. They cannot carry the essence of our empire. They cannot survive the birth. The risk is too great." Outside, the palace was alive with movement. Servants and soldiers whispered in hushed tones, glancing at each other with fear and awe. News of the Queen's pregnancy had spread faster than the fastest starship. Some worlds rejoiced at the idea of hope, a symbol of something new. Others trembled, fearing that chaos would follow a human child into the throne of 1,000 worlds. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in the guarded sanctuary prepared for him. It was luxurious beyond anything he had ever seen on Earth. Soft floors, walls that shifted colors with light, food he could barely recognize. Yet none of it mattered. To him, it was a cage. He was not a guest. He was a symbol. The Queen's choice had made him more important than any soldier and more dangerous than any enemy. He walked the length of the room, hands behind his back, trying to process the impossible. He had survived poverty, disease, and war. He had fought enemies that could destroy planets in a single strike. Yet now, the fate of a galaxy rested on something fragile: a human heart and the child growing inside an alien queen. A soft glow appeared at the entrance, had come to see him. She did not walk with the confidence of a ruler today. She moved like someone carrying a secret too heavy for words. "They will not stop," Daniel said quietly, his voice low but firm. "The council, they will fight this." "They already have," replied. Her glowing eyes softened as she looked at him. "They do not understand that life cannot always follow the law. Sometimes the law must bend to survive. This child, this life, it is stronger than any rule, stronger than fear." Daniel wanted to believe her, but he also knew the council. He had seen generals, diplomats, and rulers on countless battlefields. They were clever, ruthless, and unyielding. If they wanted to destroy what the Queen carried, nothing would stop them, nothing but the Queen herself. He looked into her eyes and saw something he had never seen in any battlefield. Not anger, not pride, hope, fragile, shining hope. And he realized in that instant that his role was not to command, not to fight, but to protect, to survive, to be human, even when surrounded by immortals and gods. Placed a hand on the glowing railing of the sanctuary window. "If the council succeeds, it will not only destroy the child, it will destroy the faith of my people, and it will destroy me. I cannot allow it." Daniel nodded, though fear clutched his chest. "Then we fight together," he said. His words felt small, yet in them was the strength of everything he had endured. "I do not have your powers, I do not have your armies, but I will not let them take this from you, from us." She turned to him fully, her expression unreadable yet filled with trust. "It is not just your life or mine," she whispered. "It is the beginning of something no empire has ever seen. The choice of a human could change the stars." Outside the sanctuary, shadows moved. The council had already begun to strike. Drones flew in from distant planets. Soldiers loyal to tradition were preparing for war. But inside, the queen and the human man shared a silent agreement. They would face it all together. No law, no empire, no fear could stop the path destiny had set. In that quiet moment, Daniel realized something profound. He had been chosen not for strength or skill or birthright. He had been chosen because humanity itself had a power the galaxy could never measure: courage, compassion, and the refusal to abandon life when it mattered most. And as the twin moons rose high into the alien night sky, a human and a queen prepared for a war that would not be fought with weapons alone, but with something far greater: the will to protect life, and to defy an empire to ensure its future. The palace had always been a fortress of power. Its towers pierced the sky, its walls could withstand the fury of suns, and its queen had bent planets to her will with a single gesture. But tonight, the halls felt empty and fragile. Queen walked alone, her long robes brushing the glowing floors, her mind heavy with thoughts no immortal ruler had faced in. She was carrying a life, a human life, a life that could unite or destroy worlds. And with it, her own heart seemed vulnerable in ways she had never known. She had summoned Daniel, but she could not bring herself to enter his chamber immediately. She lingered in the shadowed corridors, tracing the familiar patterns of her home, the echoes of countless generations whispering through the halls. She had fought wars, quelled rebellions, and outwitted assassins. Yet nothing had ever made her feel so exposed, so tender. Not power, not blood, not victory. Finally, she reached his chamber. The door was a living crystal, pulsing faintly with the energy of the palace. She hesitated. Inside, Daniel waited, the human heart beating fast enough to echo in the quiet room. His eyes reflected worry, awe, and something deeper, an instinctive understanding that he could not yet name. Stepped inside. She did not walk with the authority of a queen now. She walked with the caution of a mother. She closed the door softly behind her and let herself be human, if only for a moment. "They have already begun plotting," she said quietly. "The council will not allow this child to live. They will do everything in their power to stop us." Daniel leaned against the wall, trying to steady himself. "Then we fight. I may not be immortal, I may not have your power, but I won't let them harm what we protect. Not you, not the child." Studied him. She had ruled over millions of beings, yet she had never felt the kind of trust she felt in that moment. Trust that came without expectation, without fear of betrayal. She saw in him a reflection of something long forgotten, a pure, unyielding courage. She approached him and placed her hand over her chest, where the new life grew inside her. "This is unlike any battle I have ever fought," she admitted. "Not with weapons, not with armies. This is a war of survival, of faith, of hope. I have led people to victory against death itself, yet I feel powerless before what grows inside me." Daniel stepped closer. His human hands were empty, yet in them was a strength that no armor could provide. "Then let me stand with you," he said. "Not as a soldier, not as a hero, but as someone who refuses to let fear decide the future." The queen felt something shift within her. Centuries of experience, countless victories, all paled before the quiet bravery of a human willing to face impossible odds for life. She realized then that this child, their child, would inherit something far greater than any throne or empire. They would inherit hope, resilience, and the courage of humanity itself. Outside the room, shadows moved. Patrols of council loyalists scoured the palace. Drones hovered silently, monitoring every corridor. The queen knew that soon this sanctuary would be breached. The palace could not shield them forever. The council's fury was as inevitable as the rising of the twin moons. Yet inside the chamber, fear did not dominate. Something else did: determination. The unspoken promise that no matter what came, they would protect the life that carried the potential to change the galaxy. Looked at Daniel and saw not a fragile human, but a force of nature. One who had survived a dying Earth, who had fought impossible battles, and who now faced the might of an empire with nothing but courage and hope. "We may not survive this war unscathed," she said softly, "but the child will. That is what matters. That is why I have chosen you, not for strength, not for skill, but for heart." Daniel's eyes glistened. He had always believed his life was ordinary, unimportant, a speck lost among billions. Now he understood he was extraordinary in ways he could never have imagined. Not because of power, not because of rank, but because he could love, protect, and believe in something greater than himself. They stood together in silence, listening to the faint hum of the palace, the distant sounds of the night beyond its walls. For the first time in centuries, the queen did not wear her armor. She did not hide behind her title. She was simply a mother, a protector, a being capable of feeling fear, hope, and love all at once. And Daniel realized that he, too, had become something more. Not just a human soldier, not just a survivor, but a guardian of life, a participant in destiny, and a witness to the beginning of a story that could reshape the stars themselves. For in that quiet room, the queen without armor and the human man stood together, facing an uncertain future. They were no longer ruler and subject. They were allies, protectors, and the first defenders of a life that would one day carry the hope of two worlds. Outside, the galaxy waited. The first warning came as a tremor through the palace walls. Ships from the High Council had entered orbit without declaration, their weapons gleaming like cold stars in the night sky. The council had decided that the child the queen carried was a threat to the empire. A human-born heir could not inherit the throne. Their solution: eliminate the threat before it grew. Queen stood on her balcony, looking at the approaching fleet. Her glowing eyes reflected both fury and fear. She had faced entire armadas before, but never had she felt such a personal danger. This was not a battle for conquest. This was a battle for life itself. For the first time, the queen realized that her greatest enemies were not always those with weapons or armies. They were those who refused to accept change, who valued tradition over life. The palace erupted in controlled chaos. Guards hurried along crystalline corridors, orders echoing against the walls. Sirens wailed, sending ripples through every chamber. The queen's advisors scrambled, some panicked, others frozen in disbelief. And yet in the middle of it all, Daniel remained calm. He had been trained to survive impossible odds, but even he could not ignore the scale of what was unfolding. He saw the fear in the eyes of palace staff, the uncertainty in soldiers who had trained all their lives to defend the queen. Yet he also saw determination that radiated like light from her very being. It gave him strength. "They are coming for the child," Daniel said quietly, joining her on the balcony. "We have to protect it, no matter what." Turned to him, her expression unreadable. "No one will take this life while I breathe. The empire can crumble, the council can burn, but this child will live." Daniel nodded. His resolve hardened. He would not let her face this danger alone. He had no army, no powers like hers, but he had something equally strong: human courage, stubbornness, and love that refused to bow to fear. Outside, the council's fleet opened fire. Energy beams cut across the dark sky, striking palace towers and sending showers of sparks into the air. The walls shook and the very ground vibrated beneath the queen's feet. Yet she did not flee. She did not falter. She raised her arms, summoning a shield of energy that rippled outward, deflecting the enemy fire. The palace itself seemed to respond to her will, walls glowing brighter, floors humming with protective energy. Daniel rushed to the gates, preparing to defend the palace entrances. He had no powers, no shields, only weapons he barely understood. But he moved with precision, anticipating attacks, guiding the guards, and protecting the pathways the queen might need to reach safety. He was a human against an immortal empire, yet his determination was as sharp as any blade. The first waves of soldiers breached the outer gates, their energy rifles blazing. The guards fell back under the pressure, but Daniel stood firm, firing and pushing forward, refusing to yield. Every step he took was a testament to human resilience, every shot a declaration that life, even fragile life, deserved protection. Above, the queen moved with grace and fury, deflecting attacks, shattering weapons, and keeping the enemy at bay. She was a living force of nature, yet even she could not be everywhere at once. That was why Daniel mattered. That was why humanity mattered. One human could not match a fleet, but one human could choose courage, defiance, and sacrifice. And that choice, more than any weapon, could shape the outcome. Hours passed like minutes, the battle raging both outside and within the palace walls. Explosions rocked the foundations, alarms screamed, and smoke filled the corridors. Yet inside the sanctuary where the queen's child grew, there was a strange calm. A calm that spoke of trust, of hope, of a bond between two beings determined to defy impossible odds. Looked down at Daniel from above, her eyes glowing with gratitude and pride. "You are human," she said, voice cutting through the chaos. "And yet you are stronger than many of my kind. That is why this life will endure." Daniel did not respond. He only raised his weapon and continued to fight, letting his actions speak louder than words. In that moment, it was clear to everyone in the palace: humanity was not weak. Humanity was relentless. Humanity could stand against gods and empires alike. As the night dragged on, the enemy began to falter. They had underestimated the queen, underestimated the human by her side, and underestimated the power of determination. Slowly, the tide turned. The invaders fell back, the skis quieted, and the palace, though battered, remained standing. In the quiet after the storm, Daniel found himself at the queen's side. They both looked up at the stars, by battle but unchanged in beauty. The child inside her moved, as if sensing the victory, the resilience, and the courage that had protected it. Touched his hand. "The council will try again," she said softly. "But tonight, you have proven that life cannot be destroyed by fear or power alone. A human heart is stronger than they ever imagined." Daniel smiled faintly, exhaustion weighing him down, but hope lifting him higher than any weapon ever could. "Then let them come," he said. "We will be ready." And in that moment, as the twin moons have shone over a palace that had survived impossible odds, a human and a queen understood that the fire of rebellion had only proven one truth: courage, love, and hope could defy even the greatest of empires. The palace still smoldered from the council's attack, yet the danger was far from over. Every corner of whispered with threats. Loyalists and rebels alike were moving in shadows, planning, waiting, calculating. The queen could summon shields to stop fleets and shatter armies, but she could not be everywhere at once. And that was why Daniel had become something more than a human soldier. He had become the guardian of life, a living shield for what mattered most. Daniel moved through the corridors with purpose, guiding guards, checking entrances, and listening for any sign of danger. The palace was a labyrinth, alive with the echoes of battle, and yet he did not falter. He had fought for survival all his life, but now he was fighting for something far greater, a life that had no name yet, a future that could change the stars. Every step he took reminded him that courage was not born from strength alone. It was born from choice. Explosions from the outer walls shook the floors. Daniel dove behind a shattered pillar just in time to avoid falling debris. Around him, guards had begun to falter, some injured, some paralyzed by fear. But Daniel's presence was different. It was a reminder that even a single human could make a difference. His calm voice cut through the chaos, giving orders, guiding soldiers, and offering hope. He reached a corridor that led to the queen's private chamber. Smoke thickened the air, and the smell of burning metal and scorched stone filled his lungs. In the distance, he could hear the faint hum of the queen's protective shield, holding back waves of enemy attacks. But Daniel did not hesitate. He moved faster, knowing that the council would not stop. They would send more forces. They would send assassins. They would do everything to end what she carried. As he rounded a corner, a group of rogue soldiers appeared, their energy rifles raised. Daniel's hands shook for only a moment before he raised his weapon and fired. Each shot was precise, each movement careful. He was not superhuman, but his mind, trained by hardship and experience, became sharper than any blade. One by one, the soldiers fell, unable to anticipate the resilience and focus of a human who refused to surrender. After the last attacker had fallen, Daniel leaned against the wall, catching his breath. He could feel the exhaustion seeping into his bones, but he also felt something stronger: determination. This was not just about survival. This was about proving that humanity, fragile as it seemed, could endure and protect life against impossible odds. He thought of the child growing inside the queen, of the responsibility he carried, and a fire ignited in his chest. The queen appeared at the end of the corridor, her glowing presence illuminating the smoke-filled hall. She moved with grace despite exhaustion, her shield flickering slightly as it absorbed the energy of distant attacks. She looked at Daniel with eyes that had seen centuries and battles, yet now held something entirely new: trust, respect, and gratitude. "You have done more than I ever expected," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "You have proven what my people often forget, that courage is not always measured by power or immortality." Daniel shook his head. "I only do what must be done," he replied. "I am human, but humans, we fight for what matters no matter the cost." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "And that is why this child will live, not because of shields or armies, but because a human refuses to yield." The palace trembled again, louder this time. The council was not finished. More ships had arrived in orbit, more soldiers would come. Daniel looked out through a shattered window, his gaze hardening. He could see the vast fleets, the countless enemies preparing for another wave of attack, but he did not flinch. He had a choice: flee and survive, or stay and protect the queen and her child. Every instinct screamed to save himself, to leave this alien empire behind. Yet his heart, stubborn and human, refused to abandon what was entrusted to him. He would stay. He would fight. He would endure. Joined him at the window, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. "We face the storm together," she said. "Your courage gives me strength, human. Never forget that." Daniel looked at her, at the life she carried, and felt a warmth spread through him. "I will protect it," he said simply, "no matter what comes, no matter the cost." And in that moment, as distant stars flickered above a palace under siege, Daniel became more than a man. He became the symbol of humanity's strength, its courage, its persistence, its unbreakable will to defend life even in the face of gods. The queen had chosen him, and now, by choice, he had chosen to stand beside her, against the fire of rebellion, against the weight of an empire, and against fate itself. The night was far from over, and the battle for life had only just begun. The twin moons hung low in the sky, casting silver light across the palace that had survived the council's assault. Within the queen's sanctuary, a profound calm had settled, a quiet before a storm unlike any other. Queen rested on a bed of crystalline energy, her body glowing faintly as the life within her stirred and shifted. The child she carried was no ordinary life. It was the bridge between worlds, the hope of two species, and the symbol of a future no one had dared to imagine. Daniel sat beside her, exhaustion etched into his features. Days of defending the palace, guiding soldiers, and fighting the council's forces had taken a toll, yet he remained alert, ready to act if danger arose. His hand rested lightly on hers, a silent promise that he would protect both mother and child with every ounce of human courage. In that moment, power meant nothing. Experience meant nothing. Only heart mattered. The first contractions came like waves of energy through the queen's body. They were intense, unfamiliar, and terrifying even to someone who had conquered planets and survived wars that had entire galaxies. Eyes closed as she braced herself, but Daniel held her hand firmly, grounding her. "You are not alone," he whispered. "We face this together." The palace itself seemed to respond. Crystals along the walls glimmered brighter, energy humming through the floors and ceilings as if the building itself wanted to protect the new life. Outside, the remaining council forces hesitated, sensing a force stronger than any weapon, an unbroken will to protect life. Even immortals could feel it. Hours passed. Time slowed and stretched, each moment heavy with anticipation. Daniel never left her side. He offered water, comfort, and quiet encouragement, his words simple but full of meaning. "Breathe. You are strong. We will get through this." And the queen, usually unshakable, clung to those words like a lifeline. She had faced armies, storms, and even the vacuum of space, but now she faced something far more profound, the birth of a child that could reshape the stars. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the moment arrived. The palace fell silent, the hum of energy stopping as though the universe itself held its breath. A cry pierced the air, not a roar of conquest, but the delicate, perfect sound of new life. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He had seen death countless times. He had fought battles that had killed billions, but this was different. This was hope incarnate. The queen, exhausted but radiant, opened her eyes and looked at Daniel. Her gaze was softer than he had ever seen, filled with gratitude, wonder, and something far deeper, love in its most human form. "The child is alive," she whispered, voice trembling yet steady. "And it is extraordinary." Daniel reached forward, touching the tiny form wrapped in luminous energy. The child's eyes, faint but glowing, met his for the first time. It was human enough to inspire familiarity, alien enough to remind them both that this life carried the legacy of two worlds. In that moment, he understood something profound. Courage, compassion, and humanity were not limited to strength or survival. They could create miracles. The queen smiled faintly, leaning back against him. You saved more than me," she said softly. "You saved the future. This child exists because of you, human." Daniel shook his head, overwhelmed by the enormity of the moment. "No," he replied. "We did this together. You carried life through impossible odds. I only did what anyone would do, stand with you." Outside the palace, the stars shone a little brighter, as though acknowledging the new life among them. Reports from distant planets began to arrive. Fleets that had been poised to attack had paused, sensing the significance of what had just occurred. For the first time, humanity's courage had become legend beyond its own world, inspiring awe across the galaxy. The queen held the child close, her glowing energy mingling with the human warmth of Daniel's hand. In that sanctuary, there were no titles, no wars, no ancient laws. There were only three hearts beating together, united by choice, courage, and hope. The child was a symbol of what the galaxy could become if life was protected, if bravery could outweigh fear. Daniel realized that his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a soldier from a dying world. He had become a witness to the birth of a new era, a protector of a life that could unite worlds, and the embodiment of what humanity could achieve: the power to endure, to fight, and to create hope where none existed. The queen whispered again, looking into Daniel's eyes. "This child will remember your courage. It will carry humanity's strength within it. You are a part of this story, human, forever." Daniel smiled, exhausted but profoundly alive. "And you, queen, have shown me that even gods can be human," he said. In that moment, the palace, the stars, and the universe itself seemed to pause, acknowledging the arrival of something greater than any empire or army. A human heart had changed the course of destiny, and a child, born of courage and hope, would carry that legacy into the stars. The birth was complete. The future had begun. Years passed, and the galaxy remembered the night when a human and a queen had impossible odds. The child, now a young ruler, stood on the balcony of the palace, gazing at the twin moons of. She was not just the daughter of and Daniel. She was a bridge between two worlds, carrying the strength of humanity and the wisdom of the. Her eyes glowed faintly with a light that was neither entirely human nor entirely alien, but entirely extraordinary. Daniel, older now, walked beside the queen. His hair was streaked with silver, and his hands bore the marks of a lifetime of struggle and courage. Yet his eyes shone with the same determination that had once carried him through the palace siege. He looked at the child, pride swelling in his chest. "She is remarkable," he said softly. Placed a hand on his shoulder, her glowing eyes gentle and warm. "No," she said. "She is the proof of what humanity can do. Courage, compassion, and love, that is what gave her life, and that is what will guide her reign." The young ruler turned toward them, her small hand reaching for Daniel. "Grandfather," she said, using the term the queen had suggested, though she had no memory of Earth's language. "Will you teach me about your world?" Daniel smiled, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze. "Every story, every lesson, every hope," he promised. "You will carry them in your heart and the galaxy will listen." The palace was alive with celebration, but the atmosphere was different from traditional ceremonies of power. There were no parades of soldiers or proclamations of conquest. Instead, there was joy, understanding, and gratitude for life, for survival, and for the bond between worlds. Messages of peace arrived from distant planets, acknowledging the child as a symbol of unity, proof that a human's courage could inspire the cosmos. Yet Daniel knew the true victory had not been the applause of distant planets. It had been the choice they had made years ago, when fire and war threatened the palace, and the council sought to destroy the child before birth. They had chosen life, and life had chosen them back. The young ruler walked to the edge of the balcony, raising her tiny arms as if reaching for the stars themselves. Her energy shimmered, responding to her will. The palace vibrated with the echoes of her potential, as if every crystal and tower knew that the future of the galaxy rested in her hands. Watched her daughter, feeling a pride that transcended any battle she had fought. She turned to Daniel, her expression softer than he had ever seen. "You taught her something important," she said. "Not with power, not with law, not with fear, but with courage and humanity. You showed her that even the smallest beings can change the course of the universe." Daniel shook his head, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. "No," he replied. "It was you who carried the future. I only stood beside you." The child's eyes flickered toward them, sensing their presence and understanding, in a way only a being born of two worlds could. She smiled faintly, a mix of innocence and wisdom beyond her years. And in that moment, Daniel realized the truth. Humanity was not limited to one planet, one species, or one life. Humanity's strength was in choice, in courage, and in the refusal to abandon what mattered most. The twin moons rose higher, casting silver light over a galaxy that had once trembled at the thought of a human-born child. Now, those same stars reflected hope, resilience, and the promise of a future shaped by bravery and compassion. The council that had tried to destroy them was long gone, defeated not just by power, but by the human heart that had refused to bend. Years later, when historians recorded the story, they spoke not of war, not of weapons, but of a human man who had survived a dying world and a queen who had her empire. They spoke of the child who united two species, carrying the light of hope and courage across the stars. And they spoke of a simple truth, that humanity, fragile yet unbreakable, could change even the fate of immortal empires. Stood with Daniel as the child took her first steps toward leadership, toward the galaxy, and toward a future where courage mattered more than conquest. "Look," the queen whispered, "she is everything we dreamed and more." Daniel nodded, watching the child, and felt something he had never felt before. A quiet certainty that humanity would endure, not because of strength, not because of power, but because of heart. And as the young ruler reached out, bridging worlds and species alike, the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, acknowledging the courage of a human who had dared to stand beside a queen and change the course of the galaxy forever. The story had ended, but the legacy of two worlds united by life, courage, and hope had only just begun.